Hello everyone, my name is John, I'm the Geeky Fanboy, and welcome back to my channel where today we are talking about books. Namely, today we are going to talk about the worst books I've read in 2024. I've managed to read quite a few books this year, a bit more than last year actually, which was my goal. And while there were many good books, there were also many bad books and many disappointments. And don't worry, yes, I'm also going to talk about the best books I've read this year. That's the video that's going to come out next, so keep an eye out for that if you want to know what good books I've actually read this year. But today we are talking about the worst books I've read. And we're gonna start off with books that weren't necessarily the worst ones, but that were personal disappointments to me, that weren't as good as I thought they would be, and then we're slowly gonna ramp it up to actually really bad books before I hit you at the end with the worst book I've read this year. Okay, let's start off with some disappointments, some personal disappointments. So these are books that aren't necessarily super bad or the worst ones I've read, but that I read and came away with a feeling of disappointment. And two of those books were actually my most anticipated reads of this year. Now, one of those I actually did a single book review on, so I want to just quickly cover it here, namely the new Matt Haig book, The Life Impossible. Again, this wasn't one of the worst books. I think I gave it like a 3.75 or something. So this wasn't bad, but by no means as good as I'm used to from Matt Haig. There were a lot of confusing things that I didn't really vibe with. The writing style was a bit too preachy for my personal taste, and I just thought that this wasn't as impactful as other books I've read by Matt Haig. If you want to know my thoughts in more detail, check out the review. I'm gonna link it up here and down there. Another book that was highly anticipated for me, but also a bit of a personal disappointment, was Don't Let the Forest In. So this was my most anticipated read this year, because it's a horror book, has YA fantasy elements, and I'm always willing to give YA fantasy a try. Fantasy is one of my favorite genres. It has a queer romance, the main character is asexual, and I'm here for my ace rap. So I was really excited to get into this. And again, this is by no means a bad book, but maybe my anticipations were too high. I don't know, maybe I just had expected more, but there were many good elements to this, like the writing style, gorgeous. I love that we have some ace rap, and I love that this is YA that's actually written well. Like, this is the best YA book I've probably read this year. There's some gorgeous prose in this. There are drawings in this book that really enhance like the overall reading experience, and then the atmosphere is great. Like, you get the vibe of like the spooky forest and creatures in the forest. Like, it's a faraway school where the kids are like left by themselves. Like, the vibes are really good. Also, cover, it looks gorgeous. But there were just elements to this that I didn't really get along with. Like, the main character was like a bit too whiny, even though he is a teenager. While the ace rap overall was okay, there were some issues in regards to that I didn't like as much. I didn't like the setting, though appropriately creepy, was modern day, which didn't really vibe with the rest of the book because it's all like very spooky and sort of has this vintage Victorian Gothic kind of vibe. But the setting is modern day, which I felt like didn't really work with like how the overall energy of the book sort of presented itself. The main relationship was, while interesting, very passionate, also toxic, and I'm not quite sure how much of that was on purpose, really. And the story, while interesting in the beginning, became very repetitive in the middle parts of the book, and then the ending was very confusing, and not necessarily in a good way. Like, I actively, when I read this last chapter of this book, I like closed it and was like, what? What? Again, not a bad book. I think I was like between 3.75 and 4 stars. I think I end up giving it 3.75. Again, not a bad book. Just a bit of a personal disappointment. And two other personal disappointments I would like to highlight here are actually two books that are part of a duology, namely the Avatar Young Chen books. So this year I've read most of the Avatar books and comic books as well. And while I really liked the Kyoshi novels and was excited to finally read the Yang Chen novels, they were a major disappointment. Especially the first book in the duology is so utterly boring and not about Yang Chen at all that I was honestly left baffled by how this is even called an Avatar book. Because the first Avatar novel is theoretically about Avatar Yang Chen, the airbending Avatar, but it's also about her partner or friend, who's a waterbender. Karvik, I think his name is. I don't even quite remember. But Karvik is so annoying because he takes up large parts of the book that are meant to be about Yang Chen, but the book actually becomes way more about this other character that we don't know, that we're not here for, who does stuff that I do not care about. And that just was the case for like this entire first book, and even sort of continued in the second one as well. The second one I thought was slightly better because we actually got to hang out with Yang Chen and be more involved in her Avatar business day-to-day stuff. And I do like that the novels try to be a bit more about, political intrigue and socio-economic and politic issues that an Avatar has to deal with. But the overall story was way too convoluted, way too boring. Like, no. Like, the second one, while a bit stronger, didn't really make up for the disappointment that was the first Avatar novel. And I'm honestly now a little bit worried about getting into the newest Avatar book, which is about Avatar Roku, who I think is an interesting character, but I just hope that this next series of Avatar novels is going to be better than the Yang Chen series. Okay, and now we're slowly going into like actual worst books I've read. This first one here in this proper list maybe is somewhere between personal disappointment and also just one of the worst books I've read this year. Namely, Cyberpunk 2077, No Coincidence. So, if you've watched my ranking of all the video games I've played this year, and if you haven't yet, here's the thing, and there as well. Cyberpunk 2077 was my favorite video game of this year. It's genuinely now one of my favorite video games I've ever played. So I was excited to like get into all the other stuff that had to do with Cyberpunk 2077. You can see like the art book right behind me, and one of the first things I picked up was this spin-off novel. But let me tell you, I have no idea what this book is about. Like, it's supposed to be about a heist set in Night City. It's like this big main setting of the Cyberpunk universe, but that's about it. Like, I can't really tell you what this book is about. Like, I love Night City as a setting. The Cyberpunk universe, I think, is so interesting with its critique on like technology, capitalism, and all that. And there are many interesting facets to the setting, but none of that really comes across here. Like, I've played the video game a lot. I've read some other stuff about the universe, but I was so utterly confused reading this book, because this book is written as if it was like a script for a TV show. Like, there are POV changes in every chapter, almost on every page. Like, if you read like 2 pages of a POV before it immediately jumps to another POV for like maybe 3 pages, and then it jumps to another POV. Like, this POV jumping happens throughout the entire novel, like constantly. You don't really get a sense of who these characters are because you don't get to spend that much time with them, because, oh no, we don't have time, we need to switch to this other POV, and you're like, hang on, I don't even know where we are. Everything is way too confusing. There's like no sense of, like, there's no coherent sense of what the actual story is supposed to be, which is apparently a heist. I still don't really know what happened in this book. Like, it was just so confusing to read. If you have no idea about the video game, about the universe of Cyberpunk, I think you would even have less of an idea what's going on, because there are names and things being thrown at you that are not explained. Where if you hadn't played the video game or the tabletop RPG, you wouldn't know what those things are. And even I, as someone who played literal several hundreds of hours of the video game, was confused by stuff in this book. So unfortunately, as cool as this cover looks, and as much as I love the game and the setting, I did not enjoy this book. Now, this next one is a quick one because it's actually a German book. Because, in case you don't know, I live in Germany and I do try to read German books now and then. So, what I what this book was actually by a German author I've previously read another book of. So, and this was one of, I think, one of his newer ones. So this title basically translates as like freedom money, and the story is set in a sort of alternate closed future where, you know, people don't really have to work anymore. They just get this free amount of money that they need to live, and everything else is extra. Basically, there's also a lot of classism involved with people like living in different zones in this big city, and it sounds sort of dystopian, but, you know, a dystopia disguised as a utopia, that sort of thing. And I thought that was really interesting, and I've read a novel by this author previously that I really liked. But when I picked up this book, oh my god, it was so utterly boring. Like, nothing happened. It's supposed to be like a crime-solving mystery because the inventor of the freedom money of this idea dies under mysterious circumstances. But until you take more than like half the book until you even get to this point. Like, half of this book is just getting to know really boring characters, leading boring lives. I'm not solving a mystery because you haven't even gotten to the mystery. And then you just follow these characters doing absolutely nothing that's really engaging all that much. And then the way it's resolved is so nonchalant and like not even, doesn't even feel like the climax of an exciting thriller mystery. And it's just like, yeah, like that's it. And I was honestly left so disappointed because I had previously read a book by this author that I really liked, like 5 stars kind of book. So now I'm sort of left a little disappointed and hurt, and I don't know if I want to read any more books by this author. Okay, let us continue with, now back to English books. I'm bringing up to the worst book I've ever read. Let's start with one of the ones from earlier this year. Let's continue with The Cruel Prince. So this was one of the first, if not even the first, big book review I did on the channel for 2024. So this was like my first fairy fantasy book I've read, and it's one of the most popular ones of the genre, I think. So I was genuinely like a little bit interested and excited to get into it because I wanted to see what all the hype was about. But The Cruel Prince, and I mean, I've spoken about it for a long time in my review, in case you want to watch that. This was a very confusing book, like utterly confusing. Like, the plot structure of this is so irritating. It's not a long book. Like, the book is like 350 pages long, something along those lines. And the main story doesn't really begin until you're like halfway through the book. Because the book will start introducing plot beats where you're thinking, oh, this is the plot. This is what the book is going to be about. But then it's like, oh, no, we're done with that. Like 1 or 2 chapters later, and then you're like, oh, so I guess the story isn't about that, and then it introduces another thing. You're like, okay, so this is what the story is going to be about, and the book's like, no, we're not doing that either. And you're like, what? What's the actual plot? What are you going for? And the book isn't really about anything in specific story-wise until you're like halfway through, when sort of the political intrigue starts kicking in. So that was utterly confusing. The writing style wasn't like the worst one, but it also had, I remember some phrasing that sounded just like really childish and unnecessarily like, I hate using the word, but like edgy and all that, where I was like, this is not it. This is, whatever this is not it. And the characters were, oh god, no, the characters were so annoying. Like, the main character, the Cruel Prince, is like every YA fantasy female protagonist ever. She's like sort of a badass, but also she's human in a fantasy world, so there's fantasy racism and like a lot of internalized racism, and she's trying to prove herself against everyone. She is not like other girls. She doesn't want to be pretty or a princess. She wants to fight and be a soldier, but everyone else is really mean, and her family died because they were murdered, and she hates everyone except like her sister, but I don't know, like that basically. And then the love interest, is a bully, because it's a bully romance. And I don't care that you could argue, oh, it's enemies to lovers, it's supposed to be like that. No. The main love interest in this book, whose name I think was Carden or something, who's like a fairy prince or something, is an outright fantasy racist bully that almost kills the main character once or twice in the first book. Like, that's how bad the bullying and the fantasy racism gets. That like the main love interest and his group of friends assault, I think in one scene almost basically sexually assault, like embarrass, physically attack and assault the main character multiple times. Where you're like, this is outright disgusting behavior. And somehow these two, presumably in later points in the series, are supposed to like genuinely fall in love with each other. It's already hinted at in this first book. They do actually kiss in the first book in a scene that's utterly stupid. Well, I'm like, I can't root for this. I can't root for this couple. It's impossible. I just hated the main love interest in that book so much, and I just didn't really get what this book was trying to do, which is why it ends up being on this list. Let's talk about the next one. The book that was even worse than The Cruel Prince. And it hasn't even been that long that I have read the TikTok sensation that is Lightlark. Now, I've talked about Lightlark even more than I did about The Cruel Prince. I think it's my most recent book review, in case you want to check that one out. Lightlark feels like a special case. Like, Lightlark was so hyped because of the marketing, because of its author, Alex Astor, because of TikTok, all the promises that were made about this book. And then it turned out to be this utterly confusing, way too complicated mess of a fantasy book, which tried to be really clever and really epic and real high fantasy, but in the end was just basic ass YA fantasy garbage, the worst kind. Because I know there's good YA fantasy out there, but this is not it. This is really not it. Because Lightlark, well, first off, Alex Astor promised so many things about Lightlark. Like, she hyped it up on her TikTok, on her Instagram. Like, oh, these tropes are gonna be in it, and these lines, and these cool things. And then, like, half of these things didn't even turn out to be in the book, so people were understandably quite angry. And then it turned out the book isn't written well. And it really, really isn't. This honestly reads like this was Alex Astor's first script of this story, and then it was just published. Like, it never saw an editor. Alex Astor never even tried to do some of her own, like, editing of her own manuscript. She just, like, sent it straight to printing. And that's the story we got in Lightlark. Like, there's some, like, the world building in Lightlark is so utterly confusing, makes no sense whatsoever. Like, honestly, this reads like Alex Astor tried to, like, put every popular fantasy trope thing that she happened to know about at the time of writing, just put it into one book, one story, and didn't even consider or think about how if these things even work together, if they make sense together, if there are any, like, retcons or plot holes or anything. None of that was considered ever at any point while this novel was conceived. And this is honestly the kind of book where you can't turn your brain off. Like, and I understand the appeal of, it's a turn your brain off kind of story, but you can't. If you're like a fantasy reader, like me, fantasy is one of your favorite genres, and you read this, you can't. Like, when you read this, you're like, I can't turn my brain off because this is so utterly stupid. If you only think about something for 3 seconds, it already doesn't make sense. And how am I supposed to ignore all of these things when they turn up on, like, almost every page on every chapter? The characters in this book are the most standard, basic ass fantasy characters, YA popular fantasy characters that you can think of. Again, main character, female, around 19 years old, is special because she's not like other girls. She's powerless in a power world, but she has to fight her way through. But of course, even though she's secretly a badass, she also still fails at so many things, even though she's supposed to be like the most badass person around. And of course, along the way, she falls in love with two people, namely Shadow Daddy and blonde loaf of bread character guy, who are the most generic love interest you can think of. And even though the book is trying to be like, oh, she's not falling for the Shadow Daddy, she likes the blonde guy, she's clearly going to end up with the Shadow Daddy later in the series. Like, very clearly. And Shadow Daddy character is like the most generic fantasy love interest shadow power guy you can think of. Like, his name is literally Grim. His name is literally Grim, and he has all the shadow and darkness powers that you could imagine in the world. And the other love interest guy, who's, you know, blonde golden retriever boy, has light powers, because of course we need like opposites. And you know that the main character's gonna end up with Shadow Daddy because the blonde guy has the personality of an old man that is a loaf of bread. Like, genuinely, people thought that blonde guy was like dad age, like in his 50s or something, because his interactions with the main character were so bland and not romantic whatsoever. The people genuinely thought he was just like some older random guy. That's how bad this book is at convincing you that he has a chance of getting with the main character. And the rest of the books, the story is supposed to be like the sort of Hunger Games-esque tournament to the death, because otherwise, like, you know, the realms die and there's like magic curses and we need to stop the magic curses and people need to kill each other. And no one dies, no one is trying to kill each other. There's a tournament to the death where you're not allowed to kill each other until you're like more than halfway through the tournament. No one is even trying to really kill each other. Everyone's just like sort of talking now and then, walking around looking for stuff. No one even really knows why, because all the world building rules contradict themselves constantly in every chapter. And then just the plot beats keep repeating themselves, they keep repeating themselves, they keep repeating themselves. The world building makes no sense. Still doesn't, even after weeks and months of reading this book. Then you come to a conclusion where the MacGuffin is being found. The MacGuffin is literally a freaking egg. And I don't even care that this is a spoiler, because it's the most stupid thing I've read this year, probably. And then it's like supposed to be, big reveals and twists galore during the finale. And you're like, no, none of this makes any sense. And you can tell Alex Aster, the author, is trying to be like, oh yeah, no one guessed my plot twists. I'm so good at writing because no one was able to guess my plot twists in any way, shape or form. And you're like, this is not a good thing. Your plot twists are so unguessable because your world building and your story writing don't make any sense. So of course no one could guess this shit, because it's all coming out of nowhere with no build-up and no context. And so Lightlark ends on a really silly cliffhanger that has not been built up to in any way, with characters that are so utterly stupid and basic as the most generic TikTok popular fantasy characters you can think of, in the most confusing fantasy world that definitely never saw an editor, I guarantee you. So Lightlark was definitely the most confusing book I've read in 2024. Certainly one of the worst ones, given the fact that I ended up giving it 1.25 stars as a rating. It was one of my longest book reviews this year, I think, if not even the longest. And I do not look forward to probably having to read the sequel at some point, because Lightlark was just mind-blowing in the worst way possible. And now, for the worst book I've read in 2024, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone inside and outside the gender binary, I present to you Red Rising. Yes, this really popular 10-year-old sci-fi novel that is so beloved everywhere was the worst book I've read in 2024. And I'll tell you why. This was maybe arguably even the first book I've ever read where I wanted to actively and very aggressively throw the book into a wall and set it on fire. Okay, again, this is a book I read for the channel. You can watch the big review however you want. You get the highlights, the cliff notes here. This book is so utterly infuriating. This is the most anger-inducing, chaotic, misogynistic shit I've ever read, or like I've read in a really, really long time. And it manages to do that in quite a short amount of time, because this is not a very long book. It's definitely under 500 pages. I think, is it even 400 pages long? I don't know. It's not a very long book. It's not a new book. I think it's around 10 years old, but it's still a very popular book, especially within the dystopian and sci-fi community. And I'm not opposed to sci-fi. I'm not opposed to dystopia. Those are two genres I very much enjoy. Heck, I'm a Trekkie. Sci-fi is one of my favorite genres to read, watch, whatever. So I was actually genuinely somewhat excited to read this book because I had heard many good things about it. And the premise, people living on Mars, and there's like a lot of classism going on, and then someone tries to undermine the system by fighting his way to the top. Sounds interesting. Turns out, if your book is written from the perspective of a 16 or 17-year-old or 18-year-old, I don't know, like of an 18-year-old basically teenager who's a Gary Stu who thinks he's the best guy of all time and constantly has to mention this to you in almost every chapter. Like a guy everything is handed to, who's the coolest around. Everyone who doesn't like him is clearly a villain or will come to like him eventually. The guy who has the prettiest wife in the world and after she dies gets the prettiest and only female character left in the book, and he's just the most baddest badass you've ever seen. This is the kind of guy you have to read this book, like his POV is that you have to read the book from the entire time, set in a universe that is unnecessarily sexist and misogynistic. And I'm saying unnecessarily because sure, you can write about issues like this. You can write about, systemic sexism, like systemic misogyny, why those things might be an issue, or, rape culture and all that. All those are issues you could have potentially explored in this book. But I'm saying unnecessarily because, first off, there's no reason for this kind of thing to exist in this world because everyone in this novel is genetically enhanced to be on the same level of badassery physically, regardless of gender. And then, this book just throws in sexism and misogyny, large parts just to be like, look how bad the bad guys are, but we're not actually going to deal with, the problems that are actually behind all of this really bad sexist, misogynistic, rapey behavior. We're not talking about that. No, we'll just have guys rape women multiple times in the novel without actually talking about how this is a bad thing that we have in this culture. No. We're not doing that. In fact, we're actually gonna have the main character tell two of the rapists, you know what, I actually really like you and you're close to me as a brother, but I do have to punish you. But I do actually still like you, even though you raped multiple women and tried to kill me. So, no issue here. Every time a female character was described in this book, her face or her breasts had to be mentioned. And I'm saying her face in a way of, we have to describe how pretty or ugly her face is, not just a general description of her face. Women within the novel, if they even exist, are treated like the worst kinds of stereotypes we get. The main character's wife it's not really a spoiler, gets fridged 5 chapters in, and it's very obvious that it's going to happen. And she then just serves as like main motivation for the main character, because he needs to revenge his dead wife, but of course it doesn't stop him from falling in love with the next pretty girl, and who's the only other major female character in the book to fall in love with her, who is a badass for large parts of the book until, you know, the main character enters her personal sphere and they have sort of a romantic bond for some reason going on. And then this female character becomes a damsel in distress as well. And at some point, you know, or several points, the book has to be saved by the main character, is almost assaulted and raped multiple times as well, but of course is saved by the main male character. And then of course has to say, oh, I'm like the damsel in distress, or I hate girls like that. Literally a thing she says. Of course, there have to be, apart from all the sexist, misogynistic remarks along the lines of, oh, stop crying like a woman, or you're a man, toughen up. Of course, we also have homophobic remarks, people making fun of, you know, two boys cuddling up in the night because they're cold. So, oh, that's funny. I wonder which one is Romeo and who is Juliet. I'm making the funniest jokes in the world. And again, this would be somewhat acceptable, all of these, if those things were addressed within the book as actual issues the book is trying to talk about. But the book is not doing that. You can tell that this book is written by a white, cis male author. And I mean this in the worst possible interpretation. Like, you can just tell the way in which women and anyone who's not a straight cis guy, anyone who's not that in this book, how they are written, you can just tell. There are just so many elements to this book that make me so angry. Like, I've never wanted to actively harm a book while I was reading it. Like, every other page I would have to put the book down because I was just so infuriated by what I was reading. And added to all that, it's just that the book is not written well. It's not interesting. Like, it's written from a POV of this really annoying Gary Stu character, and the writing style is staccato sentences the whole time for almost 400 pages. It's like every sentence is only like max 10 words long, and then period, period, period. That is the entire book. Not just like 1 or 2 paragraphs sometimes when things get exciting. No, the entire book is written like that, plus the really stupid Gary Stu attitude of the main character added on top of that. Then the world building sounds way more interesting in the premise than it actually is in the book, with, you know, their different casts, different classes, you know, they're color coded, but what you actually only get to know about in this book is like the worst class, the lowest class the main character is from, and the highest upper class, you know, the really rich gold pricks that everyone hates. And everyone else in between isn't even really that important, although it does get teased that those people also have problems and they have issues with the people high up, but we don't have to talk about them. It's only like about the Reds down here where the main character is from. That's the only part that's important. And then you're thinking, oh, but it's set on Mars. And it's really cool to have a setting on Mars. Like, humanity's built cities on Mars. No. Like, most parts of the book are set in like a really generic fantasy 101 arena. But we're still on Mars. Mind you, we're still on Mars. We do have swords, and we have castles, we have sieges, but, you know, now and then we will mention that there are gravity boots. But that's it. That's it. Like, the rest of the book, you could totally forget that you're reading a book that's set in like a dystopian, futuristic Mars setting. And if you're thinking, oh, hey, cool, it's about like this main character infiltrating the upper classes, because, you know, it does get teased that, you know, he goes into this institute, into this school, and he has to change his behavior so he can infiltrate the gold society. And he's gonna like undermine the classes that he's in the institute. No, we're just gonna immediately send them off to like a Hunger Games arena where we just do generic warmongering stuff, you know, besieging castles and all that. And that's the entire rest of the book. And I hate it, because the book actually had a somewhat interesting premise to work with and just throws it out the window like pretty early on. And then when you realize, oh no, I'm stuck for the entire rest of the book in this stupid tournament to the death arena that just does the same things over and over again, like in a repetition of not events that are not connected really. And then you realize, oh no, what have I gotten myself into? And I could rant for so much longer about this book. In fact, I did. Again, watch the video, watch the review. This is probably the maddest I've ever been at a book. And I don't care that people are like, but the rest of the series is good. Yeah, the first one is like the worst in the series, but the other books get even better. You know what? I don't care. This book made me actively so angry and infuriated. I never want to touch any other books by this author or in this universe ever again. I do not care. This was honestly the worst reading experience I've had in a long time, because it actively made me hate what I was looking at with my eyes. And I'm someone who very rarely DNFs books. I think this entire year I've only DNF'd one book. One book, because it just wasn't the time. And I wanted to DNF this book not even halfway through. If I hadn't read it for you, the viewers, if you hadn't voted for it, thank you very much, by the way. I would have DNF'd it. Like hard DNF, like 100 pages in. I would not have wanted to finish it, because early on you realize this book is written by them in the most stereotypical white cis man writing style kind of way. And like, I do not care. I just do not care. I hate this. Nothing gets addressed properly. It includes themes that it has no idea how to actually talk about. It does horrible stuff just for shock value. It doesn't even wish to actually talk about them. It's unnecessarily cruel to every female character, everyone who's not a straight cis male character, and doesn't even attempt to like actually address the issues it's raising, all in such a surprisingly short amount of time that I actively had to like stop reading for a couple of days, because this book genuinely ruined my day at the time. So yeah, Red Rising, the worst piece of garbage literature I've read in 2024. And that's it. Here we are. Those are the worst books I have read in 2024. Was it a big surprise? I personally don't think so. Most of these books you've already heard me rant about quite a lot throughout the year. But of course, I'm doing this for you. Of course, I'm doing it for you, and I'm glad that you find some entertainment out of my rants. That's the most important thing. But please don't ever make me read Red Rising again. Okay, so that's it from me. Please do tell me down in the comments below what your worst books of 2024 were. And if you have any thoughts and opinions on the books I talked about, feel free to tell me about them down in the comments below. As always, I would love to hear from you and exchange some rants about some bad books. As I've said in the beginning, look forward to the next video. There I'm going to talk about the best books I've read in 2024. So yes, we're going to end it with some positivity. So keep an eye out for that video. Thank you so much for watching. If you're curious as to know what I'm currently reading, or if you want to like stay up to date with my reviews, do follow me on Goodreads or on Storygraph. Links for those profiles are down in the description below. You can follow me there. I try to write reviews for every book I read. So go follow me on there to keep up to date. And until then, that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't done it already. And I'll see all of you very soon. Goodbye.